The sky outside was still painted in soft grays and pale blues, dawn barely stretching its arms, when the bus dropped her off at the curb of the city's main airport. She stepped onto the sidewalk with a duffel bag slung over one shoulder and a small hand tucked firmly in hers. The air smelled like jet fuel and coffee, a strange mix that somehow felt both foreign and familiar. She hadn't been on a plane since she was a teenager, back when life felt light and full of open doors. Now, every door seemed to have a lock, and she'd run out of keys. She adjusted the strap digging into her shoulder and looked down at her daughter, who was wide awake despite the early hour, eyes scanning the huge glass windows and the people rushing past like ants on a mission. "Is that a real airplane, Mom?" the little girl asked, pointing toward the tarmac where a massive silver bird sat waiting. "Yes, sweetheart," she said, her voice softer than she felt. "That's the one we're going to get on." The girl, 7 years old, all knobby knees and wild curls, bounced slightly on her toes. "Will it go really high? Higher than our building?" "Higher than anything you've ever seen," she replied, squeezing her daughter's hand just a little tighter. Not because she was excited, but because she needed the anchor. Because if she let go, even for a second, she might crumble right there on the cold tile floor. Her name was Elena. She was 34, though some mornings she felt twice that. Life had a way of sanding down your edges until you weren't sure what was left. She'd worked 2 jobs for the past 3 years, cleaning offices at night and helping elderly neighbors with groceries and medicine during the day. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept food on the table and the lights on, until it didn't. The eviction notice had come on a Tuesday. She remembered because she'd just gotten Sophia settled into bed with a fever, and the landlord slid the paper under the door like it was nothing, like her whole world wasn't ending in 72 hours. She'd cried that night, but only after making sure Sophia was asleep. Only after checking the locks 3 times and folding the last clean pair of socks. She didn't have the luxury of falling apart for long. There were calls to make, shelters, to call friends to ask, though most had stopped answering after the 3rd time she'd borrowed $20. But then out of nowhere, an email. A job posting for a medical coding position in Chicago. Remote work, decent pay, benefits. It was everything she'd been studying for during those rare quiet hours after midnight. She'd applied on a whim, not really believing anything would come of it. But 2 days later, they called. They wanted to interview her. In person. She'd stared at the email for 10 full minutes, heart hammering. Then she started planning. She sold her old winter coat, even though it was still chilly, her grandmother's silver locket, the one she'd promised never to part with, and the coffee maker that barely worked anyway. She scraped together enough for a one-way bus ticket to the airport, a cheap hotel near the interview site for 2 nights, and a small emergency fund in case things went sideways. Now, standing in the middle of the bustling terminal, she felt both invisible and painfully exposed. Everyone around her seemed to belong. Business people with rolling suitcases, families laughing over shared snacks, couples holding hands like the world was kind. She felt like a ghost drifting through someone else's life. Sophia tugged her sleeve. "Mom, I'm hungry." Elena's stomach twisted. She'd packed 2 granola bars and a banana, saving them for the flight. But Sophia's eyes were big and pleading, and she couldn't say no. "Okay," she said, forcing cheer into her voice. "Let's find a place." They walked slowly, Elena scanning prices like they were landmines. Everything was too expensive. A muffin cost $5, a bottle of water, $3. She finally settled on a small kiosk near Gate B9 that sold day-old pastries for half price. She bought a slightly stale blueberry muffin and split it carefully in half. "Here you go," she said, handing the bigger piece to Sophia. "But you need more," Sophia protested, pushing it back. "I had breakfast before we left," Elena lied. She hadn't. She'd given her last piece of toast to Sophia that morning, saying she wasn't hungry. Sophia ate happily, crumbs dusting her chin. Elena watched her, a lump forming in her throat. This child had never known stability, yet she still found joy in a shared muffin, in the hum of an airplane engine and the way sunlight hit the floor through the tall windows. Elena wished she could borrow some of that hope. They made their way to Gate B12 and found 2 empty chairs near the window. Elena set down her bag and pulled out her phone. 28% battery. She opened her notes app and scrolled through her interview prep. Tell me about yourself. Why medical coding? How do you handle stress? She'd practiced these answers in the mirror in the shower while folding laundry. She knew them by heart, but knowing them and delivering them calmly in a room full of strangers were two different things. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes for just a second. That's when she saw him. Not with her eyes, she wasn't even looking, but with that strange gut-level knowing that sometimes hits you when someone from your past is near. She opened her eyes slowly, almost afraid to confirm it. And there he was. Across the terminal, near the premium coffee stand, stood a man in a tailored navy suit. He wasn't just well-dressed. He moved like someone used to being in charge. People stepped aside for him. An assistant handed him a tablet. Another held his briefcase. He nodded, said something with quiet authority, and the group moved as one. But it wasn't the suit or the entourage that made her heart stop. It was his face. The same strong jaw, the same slight crook in his nose from that bike accident in 10th grade, the same way he ran a hand through his hair when he was thinking. It was him. Daniel. Her Daniel. The boy who'd walked her home from school every day for 2 years, who'd saved up for weeks to buy her a single red rose on Valentine's Day, who'd held her when her mom got sick and whispered, "I'll always be here." And then, poof, gone. No goodbye, no explanation, just silence the summer after graduation. She'd called his house. No answer. His friends said they didn't know where he went. She wrote letters. They came back unopened. She waited. And waited. Until one day she stopped waiting and started surviving. Now here he was, polished, powerful, clearly successful, while she sat in a chair that squeaked when she shifted, wearing shoes she'd patched with duct tape. She looked down fast, pretending to fix Sophia's shoelace. Her hands trembled. "Mom?" Sophia looked up, muffin halfway to her mouth. "Are you okay?" "Yeah, baby," Elena said, voice steady despite the storm inside. "Just thinking." She risked another glance. He was turning, walking toward the security line, and then his eyes swept the gate area and landed on her for one heartbeat. 2. Did he recognize her? She couldn't tell. His expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted, just slightly, like a record scratch in an otherwise smooth song. Then he turned away, speaking to someone beside him, and kept walking. Elena exhaled, not realizing she'd been holding her breath. Why did it hurt so much to see him? She hadn't thought about him in years, or so she told herself. But the truth was she'd thought about him every time Sophia asked about her dad. Every time she filled out a school form that asked for father's name. Every time she lay awake at 3 a.m., wondering if things would have been different if he'd stayed. She'd built a life without him. A hard one, yes, but honest. She'd never asked for pity, never leaned on anyone. She'd done it all herself. Diaper changes at midnight, job applications at dawn, comforting a crying child who just wanted to know why they couldn't have new shoes like the other kids. And now, seeing him, so put together, so clearly thriving, it made her feel like a failure. Not because she wanted his money or his status, but because for a split second, she wondered if she'd been foolish to keep going alone. If she'd been stronger, smarter, faster, maybe she wouldn't be sitting here praying for a job that might not even happen. But then Sophia leaned against her, warm and solid. "Mom," she whispered, "do you think the people in Chicago will like me?" Elena blinked. "What do you mean? When you go to your job, will they ask about me? Will they think I'm nice?" Elena's eyes filled. She pulled Sophia close, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "They're going to love you," she said, voice thick, "because you're the best thing that's ever happened to me." Sophia smiled and went back to her coloring book, the one Elena had bought at a dollar store, its pages already dog-eared from use. Elena watched her daughter color a sun with purple rays and green grass. She didn't correct her. Let her imagine a world where skies could be pink and trees could bloom in winter. That kind of hope was rare, precious. She thought about Daniel again. Where had he gone? Why did he leave? She'd imagined 1,000 reasons over the years. Family emergency, got scared, met someone else. But seeing him now, so confident, so in control, she wondered if maybe he'd just outgrown her, moved on to a life she wasn't part of. And that was okay. It had to be. Because her life wasn't about him anymore. It was about this little girl who believed in purple suns and airplane adventures. It was about showing up, even when you're tired, even when you're scared, even when the world feels like it's closing in. The boarding announcement crackled over the speakers. Flight 422 to Chicago, now boarding rows 20 through 30. Elena stood, hoisted the duffel bag onto her shoulder, and took Sophia's hand. They walked toward the jet bridge, beside the gate agent who barely glanced at their tickets, past the family's snapping last-minute photos, past the coffee kiosk where Daniel had stood. She didn't look back. But as they stepped onto the plane, she felt it, the weight of the past, the fear of the future, and the quiet, stubborn love that kept her moving forward, one foot in front of the other. That's all she'd ever done, and that's all she'd keep doing. The plane ride was short, but restless. Elena kept glancing out the window, not really seeing the clouds, her mind still tangled in the image of him, standing there in that sharp suit, surrounded by people who looked at him like he held the answers to everything. She kept replaying that moment their eyes met, wondering if she'd imagined it. Maybe he hadn't recognized her at all. Maybe it was just her tired brain playing tricks. Sophia, on the other hand, was enchanted. She pressed her nose against the window, whispering excitedly every time the plane dipped or turned. "Look, Mom, we're flying over houses. They look like toys." Elena smiled and squeezed her hand, grateful for the distraction. Her daughter's wonder was a kind of medicine, simple, pure, and exactly what she needed right now. When they landed in Chicago, the sky was overcast, the air crisp with the first hint of autumn. They took a shuttle to the budget hotel Elena had booked weeks ago, 2 nights for under $100 if she was lucky. The room was small with thin walls and a faint smell of old carpet, but it had 2 beds and a working heater. To Elena, it felt like a palace. She helped Sophia unpack their few belongings, 2 changes of clothes, toothbrushes, the coloring book, and Elena's folder of interview materials. She laid out her one nice outfit on the bed, a black blouse and dark slacks she'd bought secondhand and washed a dozen times to keep it looking fresh. Tomorrow was the big day. She'd barely slept the night before, and now her stomach was a knot of nerves. But first they needed dinner. They walked to a nearby diner, the kind with sticky tables and a jukebox in the corner. Elena ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, a grilled cheese and tomato soup, and split it with Sophia. Her daughter chattered about the plane, the clouds, the lady with the bright red hat on the flight. Elena listened, nodding, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the airport, to him. Later that night, after Sophia fell asleep curled under the thin hotel blanket, Elena sat on the edge of her own bed, staring at the ceiling. She pulled out her phone and opened an old photo album she rarely looked at, pictures from high school. There he was, younger, softer, his arm around her at the homecoming dance, both of them grinning like they'd just won the lottery. She remembered how he'd saved up for months to rent a tux, how he'd practiced dancing in his garage so he wouldn't embarrass her, how he'd whispered in her ear, "You're the most beautiful girl here," and she'd believed him. Then came the silence. The summer after graduation, no calls, no texts, just gone. She'd found out she was pregnant 2 months later. At first she thought it was stress. She'd been working double shifts at the grocery store, skipping meals, barely sleeping. But when the test turned positive, her world tilted. She called his house again, no answer. She went by his old neighborhood. The house was empty, windows dark. A neighbor told her the family had moved suddenly. Something about his dad. That was all anyone knew. She never told anyone who the father was. Not her mom, not her best friend. She just carried it alone. Because what was the point of naming a ghost? Now, years later, seeing him alive and well, more than well, stirred up feelings she thought she'd buried long ago. Not anger exactly, not even sadness, just a deep, quiet ache for the life that might have been. The next morning she woke before dawn. She showered quickly, careful not to wake Sophia, and put on her interview outfit. She checked her hair in the mirror, pulled back neatly, no flyaways. She applied a touch of lipstick, the same shade she'd worn to her high school graduation. For luck, Sophia stirred as Elena packed her lunch, a peanut butter sandwich and an apple. "Are you leaving?" she asked sleepily. "Soon," Elena said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "You'll stay here with Mrs. Lopez, remember? She's the lady from the front desk. She said she'd watch you while I'm gone." Sophia nodded, still half asleep. "Will you come back with a job?" Elena kissed her forehead. "I'm going to try my very best." The interview was in a sleek office building downtown. Glass walls, potted plants, people in blazers walking with purpose. Elena felt out of place the moment she stepped off the elevator, but she held her head high, clutching her folder like a shield. It went better than she expected. The hiring manager was kind, asked thoughtful questions, seemed genuinely interested in her story. Elena spoke honestly about her late-night studies, her experience helping elderly clients navigate medical bills, her desire to build a stable future for her daughter. She didn't mention the eviction, the bus rides, the granola bars for dinner, but she didn't lie either. She just focused on what she could do, not what she'd lost. When it was over, the manager shook her hand. "We'll be in touch by the end of the week." Elena walked out into the cool afternoon air, heart pounding. She'd done it. She'd shown up. That alone felt like a victory. Back at the hotel, Sophia was coloring at the small table, supervised by Mrs. Lopez, a warm woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a gentle voice. "She's been a perfect angel," Mrs. Lopez said, handing Elena a cup of tea she'd made from the hotel's instant packets. "Thank you," Elena said, relief washing over her. "Really?" That evening, they ate pizza from a place down the street, Elena's small splurge to celebrate making it through the day. Sophia talked nonstop about the coloring contest Mrs. Lopez had started in the lobby. "I drew a dragon eating ice cream," she announced proudly. Elena laughed, the sound surprising even herself. For the first time in weeks, she felt a flicker of lightness. But that night, as rain began to patter against the window, the old thoughts crept back in. What if they didn't call? What if this was just another dead end? She stared at the ceiling again, listening to Sophia's steady breathing. And then, her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Her heart jumped. She almost didn't open it. But curiosity won. It read, "Elena, it's Daniel. I saw you at the airport yesterday. I don't know if you saw me. I've been trying to find you for years. Can we talk?" Her breath caught. She read it 3 times, as if the words might change. She didn't reply right away. She couldn't. Her hands were shaking. Why now, after all this time? She thought about deleting it, ignoring it, pretending it never happened. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the way he said, "I've been trying to find you." Not "I missed you," not "I'm sorry," just trying. The next morning, she woke with the message still burning in her mind. She took Sophia to a small park near the hotel, letting her run around while she sat on a bench, phone in hand. Finally, she typed back, "How did you get this number?" Almost instantly, a reply. "I asked the airline. Told them it was urgent. I hope that's okay." She frowned. That seemed intense, but then another message came. "I never got your letters. My grandmother kept them from me. She thought it was safer that way. I didn't know about you, or anything." Elena's chest tightened. Letters, she'd sent 3, all returned unopened. She'd assumed he didn't care. She typed slowly. "What happened? Why did you leave?" This time the reply took longer. When it came, it was just a few lines. "My dad was deported the night before graduation. We had to leave town immediately. I tried to call you from Mexico, but the number was disconnected. By the time I came back, you'd moved. Changed your last name. I looked everywhere." Elena stared at the screen. Her vision blurred. All these years, she'd carried the weight of abandonment like a stone in her chest. And now it wasn't true. Not really. She didn't know what to feel. Relief, anger, grief for the years lost. Sophia ran up, cheeks flushed. "Mom, look. I found a ladybug." Elena wiped her eyes quickly and smiled. "That's amazing, baby." Later, back at the hotel, she sat on the bed, phone in her lap. She hadn't replied yet. She wasn't ready, but then her phone rang. She almost didn't answer, but some quiet pull made her press accept. Elena? His voice was deeper now, smoother, but still unmistakably his. Yeah, she said, voice barely above a whisper. There was a pause. Then softly, I can't believe it's really you. She didn't know what to say. So she said the truth. I saw you at the airport. I didn't think you'd recognize me. I'd know you anywhere, he said, and the sincerity in his voice made her throat close up. They talked for nearly an hour. He told her about his family's struggle after his dad was deported, how he'd worked construction in Mexico City, how he'd come back to the U.S. at 19 with nothing but a backpack and a dream. He started a small tech company out of his garage. It grew. Now he ran a firm focused on clean energy, hiring hundreds, speaking at conferences, trying to make a difference. He never married. Never had kids. I always wondered, he admitted quietly, if you were out there somewhere happy. She didn't tell him everything, not yet. But she told him about Sophia, just her name, her age, that she was the reason Elena kept going. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, I'd like to meet her. If you're comfortable with that, Elena hesitated. I don't know. I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. Just the chance to say hello, to make up for time I didn't know I lost. She looked over at Sophia, who was brushing her teeth in the tiny bathroom, humming to herself. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop running from the past. Okay, Elena said softly, but just coffee, and only if she's okay with it. Of course, he said. Whenever you're ready. They hung up. Elena sat in the quiet room, heart pounding, not with fear but with something new, something fragile and tender. Hope. Not for a fairy tale. Not for a rescue, but for a conversation, for truth, for the chance to finally close a chapter that had been left open for far too long. And as Sophia climbed into bed beside her, chattering about ladybugs and dragons, Elena realized something. She wasn't that scared girl anymore. She was a mother, a fighter, and whatever came next, she'd face it, not as the girl he left behind, but as the woman she'd become. The storm rolled in overnight, thick and sudden, turning Chicago's skyline into a blur of gray and silver. Rain hammered the hotel windows like it had something to prove. Elena woke to the sound of thunder and the soft hum of the radiator kicking on. She checked her phone, 6:17 a.m., and saw a notification from the airline. Flight 422 delayed due to weather. New departure TBD. Her stomach dropped. She'd been counting on that flight to get them home, even if it meant returning empty-handed. Now they were stuck. The hotel was paid through tonight, but tomorrow? She didn't have enough for another night. Not after the interview outfit, the pizza, the bus fare. She'd have to figure something out. Maybe find a shelter or call a distant cousin she hadn't spoken to in years. The thought made her tired all over again. Sophia stirred beside her, blinking sleepily. Is it raining, Mom? Yeah, baby, Elena said, brushing hair from her daughter's forehead. Big storm. Sophia sat up, eyes wide. Can we watch it from the window? Elena smiled faintly. Sure. They sat together on the floor by the glass, wrapped in the thin hotel blanket, watching lightning flash in the distance. Sophia counted the seconds between thunder and lightning like she'd learned in school. 5, 6, 7, that one was far away. Elena held her close, grateful for the quiet moment. But her mind raced. What if the job didn't come through? What if they got stranded here with no money, no plan? She'd been so focused on the interview she hadn't thought past it. By mid-morning, the rain hadn't let up. They went down to the lobby for breakfast, stale muffins and weak coffee from the complimentary station. Sophia colored at a small table while Elena scrolled through bus schedules, trying to find the cheapest way back home if the flight got canceled entirely. That's when she saw him, walking through the hotel lobby like he belonged there, holding 2 paper cups from the coffee shop across the street. He wasn't in a suit this time, just dark jeans, a charcoal sweater, and a light jacket. He looked less like a CEO and more like the boy she remembered, though older, steadier. Their eyes met. He stopped. For a second, neither moved. Then he walked over slow like he was giving her space to say no. Hey, he said softly, holding out one of the cups. I saw the flight delay on the news. Thought you might need this? Elena hesitated. She wanted to say no, to keep her walls up. But Sophia looked up from her coloring book and said, "Hi, are you the man from the airport?" Daniel crouched slightly so he was at her eye level. "Yeah," he said gently. "I'm Daniel, and you must be Sophia." Sophia nodded, suddenly shy. She peeked at her mom, then back at him. "You have nice shoes." He laughed. A warm, familiar sound that tugged at something deep in Elena's chest. "Thanks, I like your dinosaur backpack." Sophia beamed. Elena took the coffee. "Thank you," she said quietly. They sat at the small table, Daniel keeping a respectful distance. He didn't ask personal questions, didn't push. He just was there. He told Sophia about the time he got lost in an airport as a kid, and how a kind stranger bought him a hot chocolate. Sophia listened, rapt, her earlier shyness melting away. After a while, Daniel turned to Elena. "I meant what I said on the phone. I've spent years wondering what happened to you. When I saw you at the gate, I couldn't believe it. And then you were gone." Elena looked down at her coffee. "I didn't think you'd want to talk to me." "Not like this, like what?" he asked gently. She gestured to her worn jacket, her scuffed shoes. "Like this, struggling, barely holding on." He was quiet for a moment. "Then, you think I'd care about that?" She didn't answer. "Elena," he said, voice low, "you raised a child on your own. You showed up for an interview in a city you've never been to, with nothing but hope and a duffel bag. That's not barely holding on. That's strength. That's courage." Tears pricked her eyes. No one had ever called her brave. Not like that. Sophia, sensing the shift, tugged Daniel's sleeve. "Do you have kids?" He shook his head. "No, never got the chance. Why not?" she asked, blunt as only a 7-year-old can be. He glanced at Elena, then back at Sophia. "I guess I was waiting for the right person. And then, life happened." Sophia accepted that with a nod, as if it made perfect sense, and went back to coloring. They talked for hours. Not about the past, not yet, but about now. Elena told him about her work, her studies, how she'd stay up late watching coding tutorials on her phone. He told her about his company, how it started with just him and a laptop in a garage, how he still coded sometimes when he couldn't sleep. At one point, Sophia's stomach growled loudly. She giggled, embarrassed. Daniel stood. "How about lunch, my treat? There's a place down the street with the best grilled cheese in the city." Elena started to protest. She didn't want charity, but Sophia's hopeful eyes stopped her. And honestly, she was hungry too. The diner was cozy, warm, filled with the smell of onions and frying butter. They sat in a booth by the window, rain still falling outside. Daniel ordered for all of them: grilled cheese for Sophia, a veggie burger for Elena, and a turkey club for himself. As they ate, the conversation turned deeper. "I never got your letters," he said again, like he needed her to believe it. "My grandmother. She thought it was dangerous for me to stay in touch. My dad's situation was complicated. She was scared for me, so she hid your mail. I didn't find out until years later when I was cleaning out her house after she passed." Elena's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "You really didn't know?" "I swear," he said, meeting her eyes. "If I had, I would have come back, even if it was just to say goodbye." She believed him. Something in his voice, the raw honesty, told her it was true. "And you never heard about me?" she asked carefully. He shook his head. "I looked. Changed my last name, moved neighborhoods, no social media. You vanished. I even hired someone once, but they couldn't find you." She swallowed. "I changed my name after Sophia was born. Took my mom's maiden name. I thought it would be easier." He nodded slowly. "I understand." Silence settled between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of quiet that comes after a long storm. Cleansing, calm. Sophia, full and happy, leaned her head on Elena's shoulder. "Mom, can we go to the park later?" "If the rain stops." "Maybe," Elena said, stroking her hair. Daniel watched them, a softness in his eyes. "She's incredible," he said quietly. Elena looked at her daughter, her messy curls, her smudged ketchup smile, and felt a swell of love so fierce it almost hurt. "She is." After lunch, they walked back to the hotel. The rain had slowed to a drizzle. At the lobby, Daniel hesitated. "I don't want to overstep," he said, "but I can get you a room here for as long as you need. Just until your flight's rescheduled. No strings." Elena stiffened. "I can't accept that." "Why not?" he asked gently. Let me do this one thing, please. She opened her mouth to refuse again, but Sophia tugged her hand. Mom, my socks are wet. Elena looked down. Her daughter's shoes were soaked from the walk. And the truth was, she didn't have dry socks to change into. She sighed, the fight draining out of her. Okay, she said softly, just thank you. He nodded, relief in his eyes. I'll take care of it. That evening, they moved to a nicer room on the 8th floor. 2 queen beds, a mini fridge, even a small desk. Sophia ran to the window. Mom, we can see the whole city. Elena sank onto the bed, exhausted but strangely peaceful. For the first time in years, she wasn't alone in her worry. Later, as Sophia slept, there was a soft knock on the door. It was Daniel holding a shopping bag. I got a few things, he said quietly. Socks, pajamas, toothbrushes, and this. He pulled out a children's book, The Dot, about a girl who learns she can make art even if she thinks she can't. Elena's eyes filled. You didn't have to. I wanted to, he said. She reminds me of you, full of quiet magic. They stood in the hallway for a moment, the air thick with unspoken things. Why are you doing this? She finally asked. He looked at her, really looked at her. Because I owe you. Not money, not favors, but time, respect, a chance to be in your life, even just a little if you'll let me. She didn't say yes, not yet, but she didn't say no either. Back in the room, she tucked the new socks under Sophia's pillow. Then she sat by the window, watching the city lights blink on through the rain. For so long, she'd carried everything alone. But maybe, just maybe, it was okay to let someone help. Not to fix her life, but to walk beside her for a while. And as the storm finally passed, leaving the streets glistening under streetlights, Elena felt something she hadn't in years. Not hope for a rescue, but hope for connection. For healing. For a future that didn't have to be built entirely on her back. She turned off the light and climbed into bed, listening to her daughter's steady breathing. Tomorrow was still uncertain, but tonight, for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel afraid. The next morning came in soft and quiet, the kind of calm that follows a storm. Sunlight filtered through the hotel curtains, painting golden stripes across the carpet. Elena woke before Sophia, her body still heavy with exhaustion, but her mind clearer than it had been in days. She sat up slowly, listening to the gentle rhythm of her daughter's breathing, and looked around the room, the clean sheets, the new socks folded neatly on the dresser, the children's book resting on the nightstand. All of it felt like a dream, too kind to be real. She hadn't slept much. Not because she was anxious, but because her thoughts kept circling back to the night before, to the way he'd stood in the hallway. Not pushing, not demanding, just offering help like it was the most natural thing in the world. No grand gestures, no pity, just quiet care. Sophia stirred, rubbing her eyes. Mom, is it daytime? Yeah, sweetheart, Elena said, brushing a curl from her forehead. Sun's up. Sophia sat up, stretching like a cat. Did the rain stop? It did. And look, Elena pulled back the curtain. Outside, the city sparkled. Puddles reflected the sky. Trees dripped with leftover rain, and people walked with their heads up, no longer hunched against the storm. It's a fresh start, Sophia grinned. Can we go outside? After breakfast, Elena said, already pulling out their last clean clothes. She washed up quickly in the small bathroom, trying not to think about how much longer they could stay. The flight was still delayed, but even if it left tomorrow, she'd need money for food, for the bus to the airport, for whatever came next. She couldn't keep accepting his help. Pride wasn't just stubbornness, it was protection. She'd learned the hard way that kindness often came with invisible strings. But when they went down to the lobby, he was already there, sitting at a small table with 2 steaming cups of coffee and a plate of pastries. Morning, he said, standing as they approached. He looked rested, calm, like a man who hadn't spent the night wondering if he'd overstepped. Sophia ran to him. You're here. I am, he said, smiling. And I brought chocolate croissants. Sophia's eyes lit up. For real? For real. They ate at the table by the window, sunlight warming their backs. He didn't ask about plans or money or the future. He asked Sophia about her favorite color, purple, her dream job, a scientist who makes rainbow ice cream, and whether she believed in dragons, only the friendly ones. Elena watched them, something tender unfolding in her chest. It wasn't about him being rich or successful. It was about how he saw her daughter. Not as a burden, not as a complication, but as a person worth listening to. After breakfast, he turned to Elena. "I know you're waiting to hear about the job," he said gently. "But while you're here, I'd like to talk. Just us, no pressure. No expectations," she hesitated. "Where?" "There's a conference room upstairs, quiet, no one will bother us." She glanced at Sophia, who was busy drawing a dragon on a napkin. "What about her?" "I asked Mrs. Lopez if she'd watch her for an hour. She said yes." Elena nodded slowly. She trusted Mrs. Lopez, and part of her knew this conversation was coming. She couldn't keep dancing around the past. Upstairs, the room was simple. Wooden table, chairs, a view of the city skyline. They sat across from each other, sunlight pooling between them. "I've been thinking a lot," he began, hands folded on the table. "About everything you've been through. About what I missed. And I keep asking myself, what can I do that actually helps? Not just today, but long term." Elena tensed. "I don't need a handout." "I'm not offering one," he said quickly. "I'm offering an opportunity." He leaned forward slightly. "My company runs a workforce development program. We partner with community colleges to train people in tech and healthcare fields, coding, data entry, medical billing. We cover tuition, books, even childcare stipends for single parents. It's not charity. It's investment. In people who are already working hard but just need a bridge." Elena stared at him. "You're saying, you want to put me in that program?" "If you want it," he said. "You've already done the hard part. You studied on your own, you showed up for that interview, you're clearly capable. This would just give you the official certification and support to land a stable job. Remote, if you prefer. Full benefits." She looked down at her hands. They were rough from cleaning, nails short and unpolished. "Why would you do that for me?" "Because I believe in you," he said simply. "And because I owe you more than I can ever repay. But this isn't about guilt. It's about giving you what you've earned, a real shot." She was quiet for a long time. The offer was generous. Too generous. It felt dangerous, like stepping onto thin ice. "What's the catch?" she asked finally. "No catch," he said. "You'd go through the same application as anyone else. I wouldn't even be involved in the selection. My team runs it. All I do is make sure your application gets seen. That's it." She looked out the window. A plane cut across the sky, heading somewhere new. She thought about Sophia's future. The school supplies she couldn't afford, the field trips she'd have to skip, the way her daughter's eyes dimmed when other kids talked about vacations. She thought about her own dreams buried under years of survival. But pride whispered, "You've made it this far alone. Don't let him be your savior." And then another voice, quieter but stronger. "This isn't about him. It's about Sophia. It's about giving her a life where she doesn't have to wonder if there's enough." She turned back to him. "If I say yes, you stay out of it. No special treatment? No showing up at my door?" He held up his hands. "I'll respect whatever boundaries you set. This is your journey. I'm just handing you a map." She took a deep breath. "Okay." His eyes softened with relief. Okay, they didn't hug, didn't cry, but something shifted between them, like a door that had been stuck for years finally creaked open. Back downstairs, Sophia was showing Mrs. Lopez her dragon drawing. "See, he has ice cream breath." Mrs. Lopez chuckled. "Very creative." Elena knelt beside her daughter. "Hey, mija." "Guess what? Mom might get to go to school." Sophia's eyes widened. "Like real school?" "Like the kind that helps me get a better job. So we can have our own apartment, maybe even a plant." Sophia threw her arms around her. "I knew you could do it." Later that afternoon, while Sophia napped, Elena sat on the edge of the bed staring at her phone. She opened her email and saw a message from the company she'd interviewed with. Her heart leapt, then sank. "Thank you for your time. We've decided to move forward with other candidates." She closed her eyes. Rejection. Again. But this time it didn't crush her. Because now she had another path. Not a rescue, but a chance. And that was enough. That evening, Daniel stopped by one last time. He didn't come in. Just stood at the door with a folder in his hand. "Here's the program info," he said. "Application deadline is next week. You'll need transcripts, a personal statement, and 2 references. I can be one if you're okay with that." She took the folder. "Thank you," he paused. "For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. For everything you've done, for how you've raised her." Tears welled up, but she blinked them away. She's the one who keeps me going. I know, he said softly. And you're doing an amazing job. He turned to leave, then stopped. One more thing. If you ever need anything at all, just call. Day or night. No judgment. No expectations, she nodded. I'll remember that. After he left, she opened the folder. Inside were brochures, forms, a list of success stories. Single moms who'd become coders, medical billers, even team leads. One woman wrote, "This program didn't just change my job. It changed my life." Elena traced the words with her finger. That night, as Sophia slept, she pulled out a notebook and began writing her personal statement. Not about hardship, not about struggle, but about hope. About wanting to give her daughter a future where she never has to choose between food and shoes. Where she can dream in color, not in survival. She wrote until her hand cramped, until the words felt true, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was begging for a chance, she felt like she was claiming it. The next morning, the airline called. Flight rescheduled for tomorrow. They'd be going home, but this time Elena didn't feel like she was running back to nothing. She was walking toward something built not on luck, not on rescue but on her own strength and the quiet, unexpected kindness of someone who never stopped believing she was worth fighting for. As she packed their bags, Sophia held up the new socks. "Can I wear these on the plane?" "Of course," Elena said, smiling. And in that small moment, folding a child's clean socks, tucking a book into a duffel bag, carrying a folder full of possibility, she realized something. She wasn't broken. She was becoming. 6 months had passed since that rainy day in Chicago, and the world felt different now. Not because everything was perfect, but because it was finally steady. Elena stood in the doorway of their new apartment, watching Sophia arrange her stuffed animals on the bottom bunk of their shared bed. Sunlight streamed through the window, catching dust motes in the air like tiny stars. The walls were bare except for one framed drawing Sophia had made. A purple sun, green grass, and 2 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. "Me and you, Mom," she'd said when she gave it to her. Forever. The apartment wasn't big, just 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that smelled faintly of cinnamon from the oatmeal they'd made that morning, and a living room with a second-hand couch that squeaked when you sat down too fast. But it was theirs. Signed lease, working heat, a mailbox with their name on it, no landlords banging on the door. No packing bags in the middle of the night, just peace. Elena smoothed her blouse, navy blue, crisp, the kind she used to only see on women in office buildings, and checked the time on her phone. Graduation started in an hour, she'd done it. 6 months of late nights, early mornings, video calls with instructors, and Sophia doing homework at the kitchen table while she studied medical coding modules on her laptop. There were days she wanted to quit, when the terms felt like a foreign language, when Sophia got sick and she had to miss a class, when doubt whispered that she was too old, too tired, too far behind. But she kept going, not for fame or fortune, but for the quiet dignity of knowing she could provide without begging, without breaking. And today she'd walk across a small stage at the community college auditorium and receive her certification, top of her class. Sophia bounded over, wearing her favorite dress, the one with the yellow flowers, and holding a handmade card. "For you, Mom," she said, eyes shining. "I made it last night. Don't open it yet." Elena hugged her tight, breathing in the scent of strawberry shampoo and little kid warmth. "Thank you, Mia." They took the bus downtown, Sophia chattering the whole way about what she'd say when people asked who the graduate was. "I'll tell them that's my mom. She's the smartest person in the whole world." Elena laughed, but her throat felt thick. This moment, this ordinary, beautiful moment, was everything she'd fought for. At the auditorium, families filled the seats, balloons tied to chairs, proud parents snapping photos. Elena found their assigned spot near the front. She smoothed her hair, took a deep breath, and turned to Sophia. "You ready?" Sophia nodded, clutching her card like a treasure. "I'm gonna cheer the loudest." The ceremony began. Names were called. One by one, students walked across the stage, shook hands with the dean, and held up their certificates like victory flags. When Elena Martinez was announced, the room erupted, not just from Sophia's enthusiastic "Yay, Mom," but from a small group of classmates who'd become friends, who knew her story, who'd seen her study during lunch breaks and answer questions late at night in the online forum. She walked slowly, head high, heart full. As she took the certificate, she didn't think about the airport, the eviction, the granola bars for dinner. She thought about Sophia's laugh, about the first paycheck that covered rent and groceries with money left over, about the quiet pride in her mother's voice when she'd called to say, "You did it, mija." Back in her seat, she finally opened Sophia's card. Inside, in wobbly handwriting, it read, "Dear Mom, you are my hero. Love, Sophia." Below it, she'd drawn the two of them flying on a dragon made of books. Elena wiped her eyes quickly and squeezed her daughter's hand. After the ceremony, people milled about, hugging, taking pictures. Elena was gathering their things when she saw him, standing near the exit, not in a suit but in dark jeans and a soft-looking sweater, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. He hadn't come to the stage, hadn't interrupted, just waited like he always had, giving her space to own her moment. Their eyes met. She nodded slightly and he smiled. Sophia spotted him first.
"Daniel!"
She ran over and he crouched to greet her, handing her a cup with a pink lid. "Hey, scientist," he said. "Celebrating your mom?" "She's the best," Sophia declared. He stood and walked over to Elena. "Congratulations," he said, his voice warm. "I knew you'd do it." "Thanks," she said, holding her certificate like a shield and a banner all at once. "I couldn't have done it without the program. Without that chance." "You did the work," he said firmly. "I just opened a door. You walked through it." They stood in silence for a moment, the noise of the crowd fading around them. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out 2 tickets. "I know you just finished," he said carefully, "but there's a national medical coding conference in San Francisco next month. Great speakers, job fairs, networking. My company's sponsoring a few scholarships. I thought maybe you'd want to go." Elena looked at the tickets, then at him. "Why, not as your benefactor?" he said quickly, as if he'd rehearsed the words. "Not as the guy from the past trying to fix things. Just as someone who'd like to walk beside you, if you're willing." She didn't answer right away. She looked at Sophia, who was sipping her hot chocolate and watching them with curious eyes. She thought about the last 6 months, how he'd kept his word. Never showed up unannounced. Never asked for anything. Just sent a text once in a while. "How's school? Sure saw this article. Thought of your project." Always respectful. Always distant enough to honor her boundaries. Close enough to remind her she wasn't alone. She thought about the future. Not as a fairy tale, but as a path she was building with her own hands. And maybe, just maybe, it was okay to let someone walk part of it with her. "I'd like that," she said finally. "But coffee first, here, now." He smiled, relief softening his features. "Coffee sounds perfect." They found a quiet corner of the campus cafe. Sophia colored at the table while they talked. Not about the past, not about grand promises, but about the conference. About her new job offer, remote full-time benefits. About how Sophia wanted to be a marine biologist now, not a rainbow ice cream scientist. At one point, Sophia looked up. "Daniel, do you like the ocean?" "I do," he said. "Especially the part where the waves crash." "I like the part with the dolphins," she said seriously. "They're smart and kind," he nodded. "Sounds like someone I know," Sophia beamed. Later, as they walked back to the bus stop, the afternoon sun warm on their faces, Elena felt something shift inside her. Not a sudden change, but a quiet settling. She wasn't the girl who'd stood at the airport, ashamed and invisible. She wasn't the woman who'd cried in the shower, wondering if she'd ever catch a break. She was someone new, someone whole. Daniel stopped at the curb. "I'll send the conference details tonight. No pressure, just think about it." "I will," she said. He hesitated, then added, "And if you ever want to grab coffee again, just say the word." She looked at him, really looked. Not as the ghost of her past, not as a millionaire CEO, but as a man who'd carried his own regrets, who'd shown up not to save her, but to see her, to honor her. "Okay," she said softly. He nodded, gave Sophia a small wave and walked away, not with a dramatic exit, but with the quiet confidence of someone who understood that real change happened slowly, gently, one honest moment at a time. On the bus ride home, Sophia fell asleep against her shoulder, the conference tickets tucked safely in Elena's bag. She looked out the window at the city passing by, ordinary streets, ordinary lives, and felt a deep, quiet gratitude. This wasn't a story about a rich man rescuing a struggling woman. It was about a woman who never stopped fighting, who finally let herself accept help without losing her dignity. It was about second chances that don't erase the past but make peace with it. It was about a child who believed in purple suns and a mother who learned to believe in herself again. That night, after tucking Sophia into bed, Elena sat at the kitchen table with her laptop. She opened her email and began drafting her acceptance letter for the new job. Then she clicked on a travel site and looked up flights to San Francisco. She didn't book anything yet. But she saved the page, because for the first time in a long time, the future wasn't something to survive. It was something to step into on her own terms, with her head high and maybe, just maybe, with someone who finally saw her for who she really was. And that was enough. More than enough, it was everything.